Hi, my name is Erica Jones, and you're watching the Archetypal News Network. I'm a counseling astrologer and a practitioner of the mystical arts and metaphysical healing. You'll find my work on the website realimaginal.com. And just as the moon has passed a conjunction with the deep dark planet of Pluto on her way to making a full moon in Aquarius today, I would like to invite you to check out a webinar I'm offering upcoming in October 22nd, called The Lady of the Lake, Moon-Pluto, and the Scorpio Moon, Power, Healing, and Redemption. So coming to terms with power, the power, Pluto embodies power of emotions, of our feelings, of the body, which is represented by the moon, is a necessity for anyone who has Moon-Pluto combination or the moon in Scorpio, and for those who are undergoing a transit of Pluto to the moon. That's a life-changing influence that can last about 5 years, and it's entirely possible to undergo quite an amazing transformation through a transit, or just by having to deal with this lifelong, by developing emotional intelligence and understanding that is so often missing from our families, our societies, and even nations. I can't say emotional intelligence has been at the top of the value list of many places. And also, doing this, but also cultivating a prayerful attitude towards the influence of Pluto. And that's not easy, but there really is a path, and this webinar is really about practical ways of approaching this, as well as really trying to understand that archetypal combination, to give it space to be what it is instead of trying to make it into something that it's not, good or bad. And this webinar, October 22nd, on Moon-Pluto, is suitable for astrology enthusiasts, especially if you're into psychology, and more advanced students of astrology. So you can learn more at my website under classes and events at realimaginal.com. And today I am your host for a discussion of the full moon in Aquarius. That's August 1st, that's today. It'll be exact at 11:31 a.m. U.S. Pacific time. So as I'm recording it, she's just past exactitude with the sun in Leo. And actually, I went out and communed with the moon last night, and it's a supermoon. It's actually the second in a series of 4 supermoons, so called because the moon is at her closest to the planet Earth, our planet Earth, in her elliptical cycle. And so she can appear up to 30% brighter, and it was absolutely blinding last night to stare into the moon, and also up to 14% larger, pulls bigger tides, lower tides, higher tides. And I'd say within our own emotional selves as well, we might notice every full moon tends to correspond with an upwelling of emotions for folks. And the Aquarian nature of this particular lunation, it suggests we might try to adopt an objective perspective, but actually be pulled into a very deeply subjective mode without realizing it. And so it's really helpful to make an effort to try to stay open to other points of view, to just sort of head off needless misunderstandings or just get caught in emotional drama and entanglement, thinking that you're being objective, but in fact kind of blind to, unable to see or to notice some important perspectives on what's happening. And this full moon also might correspond to some important events related to the Venus retrograde period. That's mid-June to early October. We're in Venus retrograde. She's stationed retrograde July 22nd, I believe. And so under this full moon, take note of any sudden beginnings or endings in intimate, friendship, financial, and work relationship spheres. Just those areas of life tend to be really impacted by Venus's retrograde. And let's see, on another note, this full moon also makes a very lively square aspect to the expansive and indulgent energy of Jupiter, who is also Jupiter is making a really nice exact trine to the planet Mars, which is very action-oriented. So we might actually be feeling a little bit of relief and release after several weeks of pressure or aggravation or frustrated action that was indicated by Mars opposing Saturn, which is often, Mars is go and Saturn is no. And so you bring those together. And for the last couple of weeks, I know I sure have been feeling it where it landed in my chart, of wanting to move forward but feeling inhibited in some way and having to just be patient with it. And so now with this full moon, we might actually get a bit of relief, a bit of a release valve in the cosmos for some of that, and feeling some forward movement, or at least being able to breathe a little more easily. Yet Saturn is still really in the picture. That dude wants to poke his head in everywhere. And Saturn is all about structure, discipline, sticking with things, creating form, something that's real and lasting. And, a lot of us might feel like Saturn just wants to block our blessings, just to be a problem, to make things hard. But I think one way to work with Saturn's influence is to look at Saturn as more of a guardian of the threshold, of a force that we have to pass through and be ready to pass through in order to bring forth something new or to move forward in life in a particular way. That Saturn is really trying to help us in Saturn's way, and really just tests our resolve. Are we really committed? Tests our preparedness. Are we ready to take this step? And our resilience and ability to be and stay with the trouble and to just keep going. But this is in service really to drawing forth the integrity and the deeper values that create enduring structures that benefit more than just us. Because Saturn has this very interpersonal aspect to it and speaks to our actual duties and obligations to the other, being social creatures, as ecological beings in an ecological scenario. And I'm speaking so much about Saturn because we're coming into Mercury retrograde, and Mercury is, as I'm speaking, opposing Saturn. I hope I can finish this recording without it cutting off or some glitch happening, and test my resolve to complete it, for example, right? Please just keep going. And when the conceptual mind of Mercury moves into Virgo, there's an immediate opposition, and that's just happened today. He opposes that threshold guardian of Saturn. So Mercury, Saturn, this influence I think will really be with us throughout the entire retrograde period, which will run through the end of September, but be really hot and heavy, more like August 23rd through September 15th. That's really where a lot of that activity of Mercury retrograde, we can expect it. But coming in with Saturn's influence, on the plus side, Mercury and Saturn together can bring order to our thoughts, help us to be constructive and realistic in our outlook. But when it's more challenging, Mercury, Saturn can be like the interrupted recording, things like this, where I'm trying to, we are all trying to communicate in some way. And there's problems, frustrations, blockage and inability to access our thoughts, or being anxious. Thought loops are very common with Mercury, Saturn. And I like to use mantra and the memorization and recitation of beautiful poetry or inspiring poetry to kind of take advantage of that. And I think reviewing artistic works and making an effort to memorize things, to go over and review meticulously, can be a very useful, productive way of harnessing this energy. To the extent that we can work with it, it's going to do to us also things that we might not enjoy, like maybe adopting an overly negative outlook, or criticism being overblown. That's another potential. Saturn may want to help us, but we do have to work on it. We have to bring ourselves to the project, and in order for that help to be realized. It's sort of like cooperating with Saturn to the extent that we can. And sometimes being smushed down is a part of cooperating, because there's lessons to be learned. Now Mercury, Saturn is as a direct influence, it's rather fleeting. I think with Mercury staying in Virgo for the entire retrograde period, so Mercury in Virgo for 2 months instead of usually just some weeks is quite unusual, and just signifies, just draws up like, okay, really being with our thought process, our attention to detail is so important. Now, when Mercury on August 23rd stands still, or appears to stand still in the sky and move backwards to be in retrograde motion, Mercury also forms a loose dynamic opposition with the planet of dreams, Neptune. And Neptune is in the very visionary sign of Pisces. Virgo is a very practical sign, but Mercury Neptune together is dreams can be delusional, but it absolutely, it speaks to the poesy and the poetic imagination and the desire to communicate with and to and through the divine. So I think that this particular retrograde could help us bring together Neptune and Saturn, hopefully in a fruitful way, apply ourselves to really find the gaps, find that motivation to look for the gaps between our dreams, Neptune, and what's possible in this moment, Saturn, so that we can be functional, useful, and creative in this material world in very material ways, rather than kind of getting caught up in fantasies of what could be. So if there's disappointment in that, honor that feeling, and what does it say about what you want to accomplish and how you could do better to meet those goals, or to actualize what it is that you're after, rather than just being stuck in that. Find the motivation to, okay, I'm going to go forward in a different way, or let me experiment. We have Uranus sextile Neptune coming in a lot more strongly this year, and actually this month, and actually all the way through 2030, Uranus sextile Neptune. This is such a idealistic, utopian, and transcendent energy. It's a very otherworldly energy, and but it is extremely helpful towards the things we want to vision and bring forth. So finding that balance between what is possible in this reality now, and what are we striving towards. It's just it's a nice time this month to sort of review that, and to get in touch with deeper values and how to actualize them in a real way, in service of the good dream of the earth, in service of what is constructive and wholesome for yourself, for your communities, and everything that you feel called to protect and to serve and to love. And this is really the first time Uranus and Neptune are back in close conversation since the conjunction that they formed in 1985 to 2001. That conjunction only happens once every 172 years. So it's a very uncommon occurrence. So every time Uranus and Neptune will make a direct aspect with one another in the sky, there's a resurgence, an activation of this cycle of the upwelling of spiritual vision, and big shifts in spiritual vision within the anima mundi, within the soul of the world. Seeing that particular flavor coming back through, and what does it mean in this world at this time? Things, so much has changed even in just the last few years, let alone since the upwelling of the New Age movement in the 1980s and 90s that really came forth through that conjunction. So it's a wonderful time to reflect on that, and how it is that we can, hearkening back to Saturn as the guardian of the threshold, of still being a cosmic principle, very, very active in many ways, and throughout this next couple of years, especially in contact with Neptune, how to call forth the good dream of the earth, and the seeing the divine in all things, to cooperate with the divine and see the sacred other in oneself and in the other, to realize Ananda, this idea of spiritual bliss, even within the pressures and the challenges of the dream of the earth, that this is something that we could all meditate on and work with under this full moon and through the Mercury retrograde that's coming in. So that's it for me. Thank you for tuning into the Archetypal News Network and listening to this full moon report. I hope you find it useful. And I'm Erica Jones. I'm a counseling astrologer and a practitioner of the mystical arts and metaphysical healing. Find my work, including classes and events, at realimaginal.com. Thanks again for listening, and with best wishes for your well-being in all the ways.